Hello everybody, welcome back to Lps Series 101, where I share my tips and tricks on making an Lps series start to finish. Today we're going to be talking about scripts, how to write a script, how I write my scripts, how to format a script, and so much more. If you're interested, go ahead and subscribe, and let's just hop right into it. So the goal of a script is very simple. It's to get your thoughts onto paper, so that later you can make it into a piece of media. There are tons of ways to create and format scripts, but the most important thing to keep in mind is that you need to be able to understand what you mean just by seeing the words on the page. This might seem like a no-brainer now that you have your script very clearly in your head, but as time passes, we sometimes forget what we meant or how we felt when we wrote it down, so because of that, the most important thing about a script is that you understand it. I know a lot of the formats for scripts are very organized and clear. That makes sense, but some people don't need all that. Some people can just write down their notes. If you're working by yourself, you can write and format your scripts however you want. This video is just giving you some suggestions and hopefully giving you some tips. If you're working with a partner and not just by yourself, it's a little different, but today we're going to be focusing about scripts in general. So a script in its most basic form is just getting what you think onto paper and being able to read it afterwards. Capturing those thoughts in the most clear way that you can recreate them when you're filming. Although a lot of people think that scripts are just dialogue, they are not. They can include a bunch of other stuff like stage directions, shots, editing notes, anything you want in them. I personally like to include as much details as I can in my scripts because it makes me feel like I'm going to create the final product a lot more like I have it in my head. Now, what even is dialogue? Dialogue is when your characters talk. For example, if I have two characters in a scene, I would usually write their name and then underneath it, I would write their line or what they're supposed to say. Now, this can vary from person to person. Of course, we're gonna talk formatting later. You can write the character's full name, you can write just the first letter of their name. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. But before we get into the dialogue, you first need to set your scene, which is where scene descriptors are going to come in handy. Now, scene descriptors are what you write down in order to plan how your scene is going to look like. Scene descriptors include where your scene is set, so places, who is in the scene, your characters, the people, and when it is happening. So for example, I can write a scene descriptor that happens in a coffee shop during the daytime and have John and Jacob there. Now, we need to write all of this down because you need to remember what you want your scene to look like, match the vibes that you have in your head, but also more importantly, a lot of this detail is going to be important for when you film. So for example, what set you're going to need to assemble if you are filming indoors or outdoors, which are very different experiences. What lighting you're going to need for the scene. Is it nighttime? If it's nighttime, it's going to be darker. If it's daytime, it's going to be brighter. All of that stuff is very important for when you set up your set before filming. Also, if you have anything relevant that is going to happen later in the scene, for example, if somebody, I don't know, has to have a specific object in their hand, or something has to be placed somewhere because the conversation is going to point to it later, I would highly recommend putting it in the scene descriptors too, so you don't forget as you're mid-scene that you have an object that you forgot to put there. The formatting for scene descriptors, again, varies from person to person. I usually like doing it very, very simply. I just write scene 1 and then details about the scene. After you have your scene descriptors, you're gonna start thinking about your stage directions. Stage directions are all of the non-verbal communication that you're going to do in your video. For example, in real life acting, there's a lot more stage directions. We here are going to use plastic toys, so we don't have any like facial expressions or really things that you can do with the body. But you can give a lot of information just by using your LPS right. Movements and your voice acting and anything in between is very important to your scene, and you have to write it down in the script as well. If they have to pick up something or look a certain direction or do anything that is not dialogue related, I would put it in the script. Now we're getting into the juicy part, which is dialogue. Dialogue is going to be most of your script, and dialogue means basically what your character is saying, the actual lines. Now, dialogue can be tricky, but the most important thing is that it feels natural, that it feels like your characters are actually talking to each other. You don't want the illusion of your series to break. When I write dialogue that doesn't feel natural, I usually try to say it out loud when I'm writing it and see if I have any issues. Sometimes you can even change your dialogue as you're filming. You're not committed to your own words, you can just change it up. A lot of people actually prefer not even writing dialogue at all and just winging it, which if you're able to do that, go for it. It's not for everybody, but sometimes it's the right thing to do. When writing dialogue, it's important to remember that your characters are different people. You are just one person, which that's okay. But you need to remember that different people talk differently, they have different lingos, different patterns to the voice, which it's more related to voice acting. You still should keep it in mind when writing down your lines because people talk differently and use different words and phrases, and you can even take inspiration from real people in your life and the way they talk. Of course, you don't have to do all of that, but this just helps the characters feel a little more like they are separate people than just you acting. If you're a non-native English speaker like me, I usually like to watch English-speaking series to see just what kind of phrases people use these days and how they talk, because this is 100% harder when you're not a native English speaker, but it's definitely doable, so don't be afraid of that. The next thing I want to talk about is kind of more related to stage directions, but it is camera placement. If you don't like planning that, you don't have to, but this helps me a lot because a lot of the message that you're trying to convey actually has a lot to do with how you film your videos and what your camera angles are. If you have specific things that are very clear that you want, just like the camera angles, the shots, the editing stuff that you feel like you can't forget about, put it down in the script. The scripts are not supposed to be used only when you're filming. They can be used later when you're editing as well. So if you have any notes that you want to put down regarding your editing, for example, if you have a series where the intro is in, where your music starts, where it ends, anything like that, sound effects, cuts, anything outstanding that you want to put in the show and you don't want to forget about, put it in the script. Again, the most important part about a script is that you understand what you wrote down. That's it. And that you can make it later into your videos. I'm gonna touch a little bit about formatting because it's kind of important. If you don't want to make it all like clean and organized, you don't have to. But how I usually write my scripts is I would open a Google Doc and give it a title. In the script page, I usually like to put a summary of the episode, what it's about. I have written down the story when we talked about plotting in the last episode. I still want to know what specifically my episode is going to feature as part of the story, so a summary is always good. For me specifically, I like to put down a set list, what sets I'm going to need for the episode. If I already have the same set out, and it saves me some time, so I like to know exactly what my sets are going to be for the episode, as well as the LPS that I'm going to use in the episode, which is totally optional by the way, I just like putting it down as well. After I do that, I usually start writing the lines. I would start by the stage direction of the first scene, describing the scene, where it's set, what lighting I need, etc, etc. And then I would just start writing my dialogue. You can write your dialogue in any font you want, in any size. Some people like writing it in the middle of the page, I like doing it on the side. Again, just like I said, I would write the name of the character and then the line underneath it. You do not have to do that, you can use whatever format you're comfortable with, but this is the way I like doing it. And all of my stage directions and editing notes I usually do in bold, so I remember where they are when I'm editing, and I can just scroll down and see them very clearly. This is everything I had to say about scripts. If you didn't watch the last episode, I highly recommend you check it out. We talked about plot and storytelling, and if you have any questions, I would love to answer them in the comments. And as always, have a great day, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.